Ndizi.
Ulipana ngapi? Ulipana 2. Hapa kati ndio tunasema shamba ya sibote.
We want to know what's going on right now because we're scientists. We're not so much interested in educating them because we want to know what works and why it works.
I do it to understand more, but I know that Ken has a different agenda, and as long as those interests are aligned, everybody's happy, I think.
Maybe the slight difference for me would be that I want to do top-rated science, and our group remains one of the top-rated groups in our university on international criteria, at the same time as having direct impact of the work. So I don't want to do one thing and then the other. I want to do them both together and to see how we can actually generate great science out of delivering good impact at the same time. So learning and doing all in one.
In the lab, a technology like End2Africa proposes is very effective. So you would say everyone will use it. But that's not always the case. So sometimes these technologies don't catch on.
We can learn about whether or not what we think is good is actually what matches to local people's conditions or possibilities. And the opportunity for us in the real breadth, of course, we're working across 8 countries, well in fact now 13 countries.
Yeah.
Is that we can learn from what works in one country and to see how that can work elsewhere.
We spend a lot of money to help to develop new technologies to help people to get better food production, better food security, better welfare in general. And we need to know how we can get that knowledge to people in the field, to farmers. So what we're trying to do is we try to isolate the things that matter for technology adoption. We want to know why people adopt technologies or why they don't adopt technologies. The public goods game is a game designed to get to sharing norms in the community. So we model a situation in which people have a choice to contribute to a public good, which could, for example, be a well, which everyone benefits from, or keep the effort or money to themselves, which they themselves benefit more from, but no one else does. So rationally, you wouldn't share, because you get more from keeping everything to yourself. But then again, if no one shares, everyone is poor. Papi has to follow a strict protocol so that he doesn't influence what these people think. If he says sharing is good, they copy what he's doing, not what they would do normally in their normal behavior in the normal village. So each one has 5 stones, which they can make a decision. They can put them in the public pot. Then they're worth 1 token to everyone in the group. So it's 4 tokens in total. If they keep it to themselves, it's worth 2 to them. It's only 2 in total. So the total benefit is lower, but their own benefit is twice as high. So the logic is, if everyone shares, everyone is rich. But privately, you want the others to share and not you. But we play the game 10 rounds, so people see if other people don't share a lot, they will adjust their behavior. One of the objectives today to see which examples work. So we've been thinking of things like a well, maybe clearing the road for everyone so everyone can pass. We're trying to see what works.
We're not wedded to any specific idea, any underlying philosophy of End2Africa or some of the other philosophies of the other partners with whom we are working. They invite us to the table because we bring a standard methodology.
If there are some patterns there that we can deduct and use to guide extension services, those things are actually much unknown yet. And that was one of the reasons for writing this proposal together with the End2Africa partners and say, okay, what really happens after that first step, after technology has been brought to a village? How does it spread? How does it diffuse through communities? And that we wanted to do in a bit structured, in a detailed way, in a larger sample, also to see indeed can we find some systematic patterns there.
We've not really been able to disentangle different factors that determine the success or the effectiveness of our dissemination work. But they have, they have the experience with this type of work. They have the technical background, the technical knowledge. And at the same time, they need us just as much because, I mean, we have a project here. We have, we do the agronomic work. So in that sense, it's a real symbiosis.
Mm-hmm. And the driver of our work is very much about understanding context. I mean, all of our farming systems work, but looking at it with a different perspective. So we're not trained as economists. We don't look only at economic aspects, and we don't necessarily use quite the same tools as they do. But equally, we're very much involved, and in fact what we did a better job at within the project was to set up our activities in a way that we selected action sites, places to focus, based on contrasting agroecologies, so climates and soils, based on contrasting distance to markets. So we were taking into account factors beyond, if you like, the strict environment where a crop will grow, and trying to make sure that we can then, by setting up the project in a structured way, we can come back afterwards and start to understand something about what's working where and why and for whom.
So we are temporary partners. We're teaming up because we have, let's say, our interests are aligned now. We have questions, we have funding. They believe that the type of information that we are generating will be useful for them.
They use the End-to-Africa vehicle, and I think we're happy to be used by them because we think it adds to what we like to know.
I like to think of End-to-Africa as a vehicle that we can use to further our own interest, which is to do applied research in this domain of institutional dynamics in Africa. So through End2Africa we have access to many partners who together with us can implement all sorts of interventions in a rigorous way.
Now, the approach that we've said that we'll use for our second phase of End2Africa, in a sense this work that we're doing with Erwin Bulter and his team from Development Economics is a step in that direction, is to try and use a more rigorous and structured approach to the way we set up our work. Randomized controlled trials, they're set as the gold standard now in development economics. It's really seen as very much the fashion. The Dutch ministry here in the Netherlands have got a whole unit which is about measuring project evaluation, and they're seeing this as the way forward. And amusing to us in some ways is that essentially they're learning in economics from agronomy, because the whole idea of randomized controlled trials actually comes out of early work in last century of setting up the whole idea of randomization as a way of controlling background variability.
We select our participants completely randomly. So they're designed to be a reflection of the community.
We bring a standard methodology and we do our best to come up with innovative indices to measure impact, and then we honestly report back to them and to the rest of the world, because that is one of the preconditions that we always insist on. Whatever we find, we will take the liberty to publish it in the international literature.
But it's then making sure through those processes of working together that we get absolutely clear what the questions are that we're asking first. And that determines, of course, the outcome. I mean, if you ask the wrong question, you get the wrong answer. So making sure that the questions that are being asked are very perceptive and are really drilling into the things that we need to know. Some economists that I've worked with have tended to be very strictly looking at quantitative information, analysing that, and not really prepared to build on that with also more qualitative information from interviews and narratives and stories. And I like very much in the discussions with Erwin in his group that basically people are very open to a multitude of approaches.
All right.
So we're here in Buganga. We're doing a field test for the survey that we will do in 100 other villages. So because it's such a large scale, we need to know that these questions that we are asking are correct, are the right questions to ask. So we need to very carefully test this questionnaire. So that's what Papi, the enumerator, is doing. So since it's a test, all these people are here. Normally it would be very private, so people don't have to give answers that are socially desirable, but all in the privacy of their home. With these questions, we hope to find all the things that define technology adoption. So Papi is now, of every household member in the household, trying to get how much do they work at the farm, how old are they, what is their gender. Women and men work different times, different fields, different crops. So we try to get who does what in the household and how does that affect their technology adoption. He's going over it very carefully, and we're looking how much time does it take. Do people respond to the questions well? So this is a very interesting moment for us. It's the first time we're doing this, so very excited.
To be able to explain and unravel and understand the responses, you need all of that richer narrative around it as well.
We only start working on projects where we believe there is scope at the end of the day for interesting academic work as well. So we're not evaluated, assessed, or paid for doing socially useful work. Although of course it's nice if at the end of the day it turns out to feed into a debate and helps people. But we are paid to do academic work. So we do research, we publish, and we are the neutral partners in these types of ventures.
I'm sure that when they come up with their first findings and we sit and listen and respond to them, there'll be a very, very rich learning at that point because of the different perspectives that we bring and the different understandings. And it's very often then, in a sense, that sort of clash of or the bouncing off each other of ideas coming from very different backgrounds can actually lead to very rich learning. I don't think it's sort of us pushing the technology and then working out where it works. I see that them adding just an extra dimension, to that to this whole issue for us of trying to understand the context of why things work better in certain circumstances for some people and in others for others. And of course what we want to do is a dual objective, of course, is to learn how well we're doing it and how we can do things better. So how we can actually improve the delivery overall of good technologies.
To some extent we start with the application. I think because of the randomized controlled trial setup that we have adopted.
This randomized controlled trial approach doesn't only involve games, of course. It can involve simply setting up comparisons in a structured way, measuring different intervention treatments and looking at the responses of different groups.
We start out with some hypotheses and theories. Together with our partners, NGOs, we apply the treatment. We measure all sorts of things in the treated villages as well as in the control villages. And hopefully we can understand a little bit better what works for whom and why.
It basically it allows us to get a better insight into what are the major factors which are determining success in its broadest sense.
And at some point, let's say the understanding bit or the research part is gone, then we have arrived at some rules regarding a decent treatment, and then it's up to our partners to upscale and just apply.
And then you can stand back and let people go off on their own, because I mean it's important then not to try and control things too much, because that can actually close down, if you like, the space for innovation or free thinking.